te mana whenua, Ngāti tō rangatira, te Atiaua, o te rā, taranaki whānui ki te whanganui ātara. E rau rangatirama, tēnei te mihi, tēnei te whakaaro nui ki au koutou katoa. Ko waiahau, ko taupiri te maunga, ko Waikato te aua, ko Waikato-Tainui Te iwi, ko Parekawhia McLean tōku ingoa. As I said, apologies for being a little bit delayed this morning, but I know that there are a couple of people here from the Waikato, so if you're travelling out of Hamilton in autumn, there is often fog, so I should have really have come down last night to have been here a little bit earlier. Unlike the other speakers here who have probably kept theirs to 5 minutes, I'm going to do a very fast transition through the number of slides that I do have because I do want the opportunity to introduce myself to you so that I make the connection to all of you fantastic 18 to 25-year-olds, and I will get to the slide which makes that connection to each of you and the relevance. So this is me when I was 2 hours born. I wanted to say though that what has always been very important to me growing up has been education. So my grandparents and my parents never had the opportunity to go into formal education as they were growing up. There were certain reasons why that happened, but the values that they instilled in myself and my 8 other brothers and sisters was really around getting educated, getting out amongst a bigger world and so on, seeing the world for what it is. And so while I've had the opportunity over the years to study overseas at the University of Wisconsin, a couple of years ago I went to Stanford, I visited Google X, also went to Silicon Valley and saw a number of amazing initiatives and lots of very bright people like yourselves creating things. But for me, what's always important is where I grew up, which was whatawhata, and the grounding I got as a child at whatawhata school. And it's when I was there many years ago, there were only 60 students at this very small rural school, and we were all related to each other. So apart from all my brothers and all my older brothers and my sisters, going to a school in a rural community where you're related to most of the people there, except for about 2 or 3, I think it does give you a different outlook and perspective on life, because you're in an environment where, you know, I certainly didn't get any troubles instead of being bullied or anything like that, because all my older brothers looked after me. So that's my schooling. The next couple of slides. I worked in this building, the Beehive, not too far away from here. So my public service career, I spent almost 18 years working largely on policy assignments. When I was in the Beehive, I spent 5.5 years in the Prime Minister's Department, where I advised Jim Bolger, Jenny Shipley and Helen Clark, who I have to say, I'm very hopeful that she will become the Secretary General of the United Nations. That would be an amazing achievement for our little country here, but also if anyone is going to do it as the first woman, she certainly has the opportunity to. So that's a little bit about my public service career, as I said, largely in the policy space. This next slide is where I now work, and this is what I call our own whare mere, Beehive. This is a photo of our tribal parliament in Waikato-Tainui, Te Whakakitenga o Waikato. It's been renamed only very recently, and I'll get to the reason and I'll explain that because it's linked to the kōrero that we're having as well. And I've been the Chief Executive now for Waikato-Tainui for almost 5.5 years, and it's a real privilege and an honour to do the things that I do, particularly working for and on behalf of our 68,000 registered tribal members. This photo here is of the team that I work alongside, all the various people, and we took this photo last year as part of our annual report, and after taking a very serious photo, I said, okay, we're going to do one silly photo. And so the cameraman went, okay, you got 3 seconds, 3, 2, 1, and this was the photo that came out. And I love this photo because it just shows people in their, I guess, natural form and state. But there are people right behind myself and Mike Pōhio, who was the CEO at the time of Tainui Group Holdings, doing these sort of puppet things behind us, being very silly and so on. I sent that photo to all my team, to the staff, and I said, that is the photo that's going in their annual report. They all started freaking out and started sending emails to each other about, you can't do that, you know, we love that serious one. This next photo is really my connection to all of you. So these are my two daughters. Te Uranga in the white is 17 and Kiriata is 25. So they're in the same bracket as all of you fantastic people are. My 17-year-old lives in Auckland. She's year 13 at Mount Albert Grammar. Last year, she went to Italy and spent on an AFS exchange. Kiriata lives here with my two grandchildren, so I'm a proud grandmother as well. And Kiriata is working for Creative New Zealand as an events coordinator. When she told me she was pregnant with my first mokopuna, I have to say I was slightly shocked. But she rang me and I knew as soon as she was talking to me on the phone that she's either dropped out of university or she's pregnant. And she told me, Mum, don't worry about it. I'm going to take one semester off, then I'm going to go back and finish my degree. That's exactly what she did. She finished her degree, and I was really honoured to be the guest speaker when she received her degree, which is a Bachelor's of Music, and then she finished an honours degree in composition as well here at Victoria University. So as I was thinking about my presentation to you today, the girls were with me over the weekend, and I told them about what I was doing. And so the next couple of slides around the question that was posed of me, I just want to, their whakaaaro, their thoughts have informed my responses to that question. I just want to come back to when I mentioned our tribal parliament ko te whakakitenga o Waikato being renamed by the Māori king, Kīngi Tāwhio in February. The name whakakitenga comes from this saying from the second Māori king, which says, mehemea kare kauana he whakakitenga ka mate te iwi. Where there is no vision, the people will perish. And so for those of us in the bureaucracy, in my case, in the tribal bureaucracy of Waikato-Tainui, the key take-out message for us is that as we are looking ahead as leaders, as decision makers, we must always be thinking about the future that we are creating. It should be a better future. It's all about legacy building. So that's, I'll leave that with you all to think about. Just the other point about my particular iwi, 68,000 tribal members, of which 70% are under the age of 40. So I'm often in the presence of groups like this, talking to our younger rangatahi about what it is that they are doing, what are their dreams, what are the aspirations they have for themselves, for the communities, the families that they work for, and so on. So it's really important to always, I think from my perspective, is always important to keep those aspirations and, looking out, looking forward. The other thing I want to say is that we were the first tribe to settle a historical claim in 1995. As a consequence of that, so if we're looking at 20 years out, if we look back at our 21 years that have just passed, part of that settlement, the cash, the value of that settlement was $170 million. Today, we are $1.2 billion total assets. We've distributed almost $100 million across our tribal members, across our marae. We are the major landlords in Hamilton City, so there's a number of buildings, particularly that house government agencies and so on, where we are the landlords. Waikato University, Wintec. If you haven't, and if your parents haven't yet been, you should take you to the Airport Hotel in Auckland, because we own that hotel, but it also enjoys probably the most, in terms of occupancy, but it's about 86-90% occupancy. So, it's if I put it crudely, it's a cash cow for us in terms of the value. To the next slide, in terms of what we're doing at a social cultural level, Our iwi environmental management plan is being used and rolled out across the Waikato by local government, NZTA, the expressway, the infrastructure that's been built in the Waikato. It won a major award last year from the New Zealand Planning Institute as being the best strategic plan, up against a whole lot of other plans. Our education plan is all about investing in our children, investing in the likes of your cohort, because that's where we see the development, the future potential of the iwi, not just of the iwi, but also of the Waikato region, is in our young people. We're into technology as well, so we've created a number of resources recently. So instead of just talking about, for example, the quality of our river and water, we've designed an app 2 years ago, which is free, and it's like an educational tool, particularly targeting our children so that they get to use it. And likewise with some of our own Māori language tools as well. We've really tried to bring on board, and certainly in terms of our business, using the latest technology and so on. If I go to the question, what does the changing nature of the relationship between the Crown and Māori mean for the environment, the economy, and inclusiveness? A very good question. Whoever designed that question, I thought fantastic, because it really did make me think. That's why I had to ask my very outspoken daughters what they thought of that pātai, so that I don't look stupid in front of yous all. They did say that, oh Mum, if you're talking to a group of our age, you've got to know what you're talking about. So I use them as my test case. So there's a couple of things. The first slide, my 3 thoughts are, so if I was thinking about this, and I do think about this in terms of a policy context, so it is really important, and I'm saying this from my own experience, having worked here in Wellington and now working back on the ground with communities at a regional level, that the sort of issues that we are grappling with now, whether they're social, cultural, environmental, or building the regional economy, it requires people to work in partnership with one another. And the other part is that you take an integrated or a holistic approach to improving outcomes or improving people's well-being, so that it is not just a social agenda, it is not just an economic agenda, it is not just about the well-being of our environment, but what we need to do is make sure that those 4 areas are inseparable. And that is certainly an approach that, and I'm using iwi Māori in a very generic sense now, to be inclusive of not just tribal entities, but others as well, urban Māori and so on. So, and many, if you get out and have a look like I do, I guess it's my job, you will see their plans encompass the social, cultural, economic and environmental well-being. I'm also seeing it, which is why I am encouraged when I come back to Wellington, seeing that same thinking starting to be adopted by the Crown. So I'm putting a positive on this because I see the business growth agenda, regional development that's been rolled out in some of the priority areas, the social investment framework, which you may have already been exposed to by Treasury officials, and some of the work that's happening in environment. So there definitely is an attempt to take a much more holistic approach to both policy and how it's implemented out on the ground. However, and this is my big but on this, is that for the iwi, for iwi Māori, the capability or capacity is not yet there. If you are a Ngaitahu, if you are a Waikato-Tainui, then you have some resources, you have an engine room to engage effectively in some of the major issues with the Crown. A major issue for myself, being from the Waikato, is water. There's a lot of kōrero going on about water. There's petitions that are a recent petition around water quality, allocation, those articles recently in the paper about the selling of water to overseas people, and they're making millions out of it. So that is a major concern, and that is certainly something my daughters and we talked about over the weekend. So, I think it's encouraging the framing up of how we're framing up policy, challenges and solutions, but we've got to do more. My next whakaaaro, or second thought, if we carry on to the next slide, is that, and again I'm going to bring it back down to policy again, but what I am also observing is that, and what I want to see is that the policy, where it affects or impacts on Māori, or even Pasifika people and others that are disadvantaged or vulnerable, that has to be at the centre of any Crown policy and intervention, not to the side or an add-on. A very good example of that, again another issue that's happening for us, is the modernisation of child, youth and family. So this is an area where we have been doing some work in at an iwi level. How do we get a lot more of our children who are in the care of the state back amongst their whānau and kin in a really wide sense here, not maybe their immediate whānau, but how do you do that? And so what I'm seeing with the modernisation report that came out recently is that putting children at the centre of that policy and practice. That makes absolute good sense to me. That's a really sensible way of framing up that issue. But it hasn't been done. So that's why this is going to be a challenging process. Back to the relationship, I think there's some really healthy tension, but the relationship between iwi Māori and the Crown is continuing to evolve and continuing to mature. So for ourselves, Waikato-Tainui and Ngāi it is at a mature state. It's at an advanced state, I should say. Others that have just settled or still in the pre-settlement phase, well, there's still a lot to do in terms of that relationship. My final point here, and I'm using the bureaucracy in a really generic sense, so whether it's central government, local government, or tribal bureaucracy, we must be professional. We must ensure that we're keeping the outcomes that we are wanting to contribute to at the foremost of our mind. We apply different tools. We should be applying different frameworks. We shouldn't be afraid to be tested, our assumptions being tested, and I expect that you will do that today in our little session. My final slide, my final whakaaaro thought, is how do we continue to remain relevant in the 21st or 22nd century? This is something that is a major challenge for myself within Waikato-Tainui, because as I said before, 70% of our membership is under the age of 40. Many of our rangatahi are not engaged with the tribal bureaucracy. They don't have any interest. They don't see the value. So that tells me, how do we make ourselves relevant in their lives? And it's the same, I would say, around government and the Crown as you're thinking about that kaupapa. And I think it's already been touched on, changing demographics, technology, greater innovation, skills and capability. I'm pretty sure that you've heard this before, but that is certainly going to have an impact on us in terms of our future outlook. My final slide is really to you all. What does success look like for you? Thinking about the questions that you have, and I certainly am an optimist, and I always have a positive outlook. So therefore, I think the future is bright for all of us, especially as in this room here, I can feel it. I can feel the energy, and I'm really looking forward to sitting down at the tables and listening to the kōrero. But we do have to be prepared. We do have to be ready for what is on the horizon, and that's not too far away. So thank you. Hope you found that valuable.